Alright, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. So today our group 5, which consists of me, Aiman, my friends Ilyas and Hazinakuddin, will present about the topic from the Pulse 2 textbook that we digitalize, which is Unit 6, Money. So this is our table of content, and let's start with our view. So, for our project, we decided to tackle Chapter 6 from the Form 2 Pulse 2 textbook, which is all about money. So, if you look at the original textbook, it is heavily text-based and very British-focused. So, our mission was to transform the static syllabus into highly engaging, fully gamified digital module in Canva, localized specifically for Malaysian teenagers. So, this is our learning objective. So by the end of our lesson, student will be able to identify vocabulary related to jobs, chores, and money transactions commonly used in everyday contexts. Second is for cultural awareness. They will differentiate between UK and Malaysian shopping cultures, like comparing car book sales to pasar malam by accurately sorting facts within our gamified reading modules. And finally, students will be able to distinguish between appropriate and inappropriate expressions to communicate about money, including asking for a favor. So this is instructional design justification. So we use hybrid approach, combining Eddie and Sam. So we use Eddie for our, we can say, macro level planning. During the analysis phase, we realized that simply putting textbook questions on a screen would cause typing fatigue and bore to the students. So we needed a highly interactive solution. So this is why we use SAM, the successive approximation model, for the actual Canva development. So we build arcade games in Canva requires agility. So SAM allowed us to build rapid prototypes of our widgets. So our team immediately tests the drag and drop mechanics or the SWOT features and other features and give each other peer feedback. And refine the user interface before finalizing it. So we also carefully structured our content sequencing. We didn't just throw them into a game. We built a progressive flow, which starting with a phase 1 pre-training for vocabulary, moving to phase 2 where we discuss the reading comprehension as a mission intel cutscenes, and finally phase 3, which the active application through boss patterns. So lastly, assessment strategy. So we completely avoided high-stakes, stressful quizzes at the end. So instead of we integrated continuous low-stakes formatting checks. So the student will get immediate visual and audio feedback, like a buzzer sound if they drop an item in a round portal, which ensures active learning and schema construction without the stress of a traditional test. So now we will move to the multimedia justification.
So hi everyone, my name is Nachi and I will be presenting about multimedia justification. So to transform the textbook content into a more engaging self-instructional experience, we integrated various multimedia elements, including visual illustrations and icons related to many jobs in daily life, interactive accordions and clickable navigation features, progress indicators to support self-monitoring, animated elements and sound effects to increase learner engagement, and also gamified module cards and achievement features to encourage exploration. So to move on to a more deeper understanding of our multimedia justification, so we use Mayer's multimedia principles, and we selected 4 principles, which is the first is coherence principle. So the coherence principle states that learners learn better when unnecessary information is excluded. And in our module, we only included visuals, animations, and audio elements that support the learning content related to Unit 6 Money. We avoided excessive decorations and irrelevant media that might distract learners from the learning objectives. So for the second principles, we choose segmented principle, where it suggests that learners understand information better when it is presented in smaller manageable sections. For in our module, we divided the activities into different sections so that the students can learn better without having cognitive overload. And the third one is pre-training principle, where it states that learners benefit from being introduced to key concepts before engaging with more complex content. So we incorporated introductory information, learning objectives, and topic overviews at the beginning of the module. So this will help learners become more familiar with important vocabulary, grammar topics, and learning expectations before starting the activities. And the last is multimedia principle. So it states that learners learn better from words and relevant visuals together than from words alone. So we integrated icons, illustrations, and other things throughout the module so that it can help learners understand the content more easily and maintain their engagement during self-directed learning. And the second principles that we choose is scrap design. So the first principle is contrast, where it focuses on creating visual differences to make important information stand out and improve readability. So in our module, we use dark green backgrounds with white and gold text to create a clear visual distinction. So it can make the learners focus on what is important in the module. And the second is repetition. So repetition emphasizes using consistent design elements throughout the learning material. So throughout our module, we maintain a clear color palette, which is green color. And the third one is alignment, which ensures that all elements are arranged in an organized and structured manner. So in our module, the text, images, icons, and interactive components are carefully aligned to create a clean and professional layout. So this will improve readability and helps learners focus on the content without feeling overwhelmed. And last but not least is proximity, where it states that related information should be grouped together to help learners understand relationships between concepts. So in our module, we make sure that the content is grouped together so that the learners can see the reading material and the questions without needing to skip to another part.
Hi, Assalamualaikum. My name is Muhammad Ilyas Ilyasa, and I will be showing you how our instructional module works. So this is the welcoming page. On this page, we introduce students to the topic of the module, which is PALS 6, based on PALS 2, Unit 6 Money. So we explain what will they learn in this module. We also explain what is the learning objectives of this module, which heavily focus on vocabulary, grammar, and communication. What is inside this module, and last but not least, the tips on how should students use this module to get the most out of it. That's pretty much it for the welcoming page. Let's jump into the first section of the module. So for the first part of the module, we started by doing an activity that exposes students to vocabulary that related to the topic. For example, in this activity, students need to rate the shows that they see on the screen based on how enjoyable it is. We also implement this component here where students can listen how to pronounce the words that they see by clicking the speaker button.
Wash cars.
Wash cars. And then they need to read it, then they move to the next chores.
Babysit.
Babysit.
Pet sit.
That's it. That is for the first activity. Moving on to the second activity, Second activity, the students need to listen to the audio by clicking on the YouTube video on the left side of the screen.
Unit 6. Vocabulary and Speaking. Jobs and Chores.
And then students need to answer the questions given. There are a total of 5 questions. And if they want to check the answer, they can just click this button right here. And if they want to try again, they can click on the try button. So for the next activity in section 1 is Questboard, where students need to look into each chores and then determine whether or not they always or sometimes already did the chores. For example, and after they finish doing the activity, they can just submit Questboard. And then the next one is pretty similar to the previous activity. Students need to identify which chores they did the most and determine the frequency. Sometimes, usually never always. That's all. And the last activity is English practice check, where students need to answer based on the question given. For example, do you do the washing up at home? Yes, always. It's the main idea behind this is again to familiarize students with the vocabs needed in this topic. Students just need to finish it till the questions end, then students can proceed to the next section. So for the second section of the module, we'll be focusing on the grammar component of the module. For example, we'll be focusing on future form, be going to work. The first slide will show and explain about the verb component itself. And then the first activity is students need to fill the blank space with the correct form of be going to. For example, we also provided students with a clue on the right side beside the check button so that students know the words that they need to write. For example, students write their answer. It's not going to go to. Then they can check the answer by clicking the check button. If the answer is correct, that's what will happen. But if the answer is wrong, the question will give them 2 more tries. And if they didn't manage to answer it correctly, the answer will pop up itself. The correct answer will pop out itself. Just like that. Let's move on to the next activity. The next activity is Question Builder, where in this activity students need to build complete sentence based on the words given. What students need to do is that click on each word to form the correct sentence. For example, are you going to go on shopping Saturday? Or if they didn't manage, if they want to change their answer, they just have to click the words again. To go shopping or go shopping Saturday. Check the answer. But if they answer it incorrectly, they will receive a hint and they can try again. That is for the third activity. The fourth activity, the theme is space. So what students need to do in this activity is students need to choose the correct answer based on the situation given. Also put some kind of ambience sound in the background to make it interesting. If students manage to answer it correctly, they get 1 star, and explanation is the reason behind the correct answer. If students answer it incorrectly, the correct answer will pop out, reason, the explanation. Final score will show after students finish the activity. Then over here you can write the future prediction. Students can play again. The next section is more like kind of an arcade game. Students need to and a text will appear. So in this text, students need to pay attention and read it carefully as it relates to the activity, to the next activity. For example, out of text. That will be asked later. The first activity is that students need to catch the facts and put it into the correct bracket. For example, selling from cars refer to car sales. Oxfam refer to charity shop. No one needed refer to sweatshop. And profits help people in need refers to charity shop. And cheap prices from a book refers to cheap prices from a book promises. If they answer it incorrectly, the help point will reduced by 10% for each mistake. For example, on this part, students need to flick the fact that in the middle of the slide to the correct part. For example, boy from Malaysia, Jimmy for a Great Britain for UK. Masa malam. That's what happens if they answer it incorrectly. Then on this part of the activity, students need to determine whether it is correct or wrong before the text reaches the bottom of the screen. For example, if they didn't manage to answer it correctly or within the given time, they will reduce their help point. Next one is students need to rearrange the words to build a complete sentence. And then they can cast the spells. If they answer it wrong, then reduce the help. That's it for the fourth activity. Over the fourth section. Over the fourth section, they can play again if they want. Oh, that's all for the third section. Let's move on to the fourth section. So on the fourth section, we would like to focusing this part onto the listening skills, where the activity will test students' listening ability. For example, students click.
I've got some money for my birthday. Mom thinks I should put it in the bank and save it, but I want to go shopping.
And students click start for the activity. The audio will pop out, and students need to hear the sentence correctly in order to get the answer. Students need to drag the answer to the bracket in order to answer it. For example, if they answer it incorrectly, the bracket will turn red, and green if the answer is correct. We also provided we also included animation or cartoon at the left side of the screen to put more context and make it more interesting.
Central Market is a great place to buy unique clothes and jewelry.
Also trying to change it to be more localized. Central Market refers to pasar seni that's very popular in KL.
Some stores, let's have a not every other people collect money for charity, like this one for sick children. I haven't got any money left now. I'll have to borrow some money from my friend to buy my bus ticket.
And then let's move on to the second activity. Second activity is about practicing students' intonation or pronunciation, especially when asking for a favor. For example, the screen will show about the detail of the sentence. Students need to click on the word, and then they can click on the hear button to hear the pronunciation.
Can I ask you a favor?
And then they should try it by themselves and rate based on how confident they are in pronouncing or saying the words.
Could you lend me, please?
Could you lend me, please?
I want to buy a.
I want to buy that. That's pretty much it for the second activity in the fourth section. And then after that, students can proceed to the next section. The next section is about pocket money. Students in this section will like to focus more on reading and comprehension ability, where students need to read all the information here, and then there will be a mini quiz at the bottom to check whether or not they understand what they're reading. If they answer it incorrectly, clue will be given, and a try again will be given too. The next one is about still focusing on reading. Students need to read the short text on the top of the screen and then answer true or false based on the questions. After they finish answering, they can click show answer and see the result. That can reset it if they want. The next activity is students need to read the text again, and students need to drag each clue to the correct profile. The clue is at the bottom of the screen. Students will need to drag the correct clue to the correct profile. Then after finishing, check profiles to check the answer. They can see the result at the bottom left of the screen. That's pretty much of section 5 activity. Let's move on to the last section of this self-instruction module. The last section is also focusing on the reading and comprehension ability. The theme behind it is case or investigation. So the first page will provide students with instruction and also a letter. Students need to read the letter carefully in order to understand it, and then students can start by clicking the Start Investigation button. Students need to click on each evidence card to see the questions and answer the questions based on the letter previously, that letter shown previously. If they want to see the letter again, they can simply click on the see later button. Then they go back to the previous slide. After finish answering, if they answered correctly, confirm this will what happened if they answered correctly. And if they answer incorrectly, clue will appear and they will need to try it again. If they answer incorrectly more than 3 times, they will need to try again from the beginning. To finish the answering, they can check the answer and then they can see the points. That is the first activity. The second activity is also based on the letter earlier. Students will be given instruction and they need to click on each feed to see the questions and the answer. The questions of this activity is to identify the correct pronoun of the words, the highlighted words. For example, they can also access the letter by clicking on the original letter button at the bottom left of the screen. They answer correctly, sound will appear and confirmation will also appear. But if they answer incorrectly, the buzz sound will appear, then they need to try it again. And if they get wrong answer more than 3, they need to start again. If the students manage to answer all correctly, they will receive their scores. They can also repeat it if they want. The final activity in the sixth section is about students will receive the instructions and also tip. So for this activity, students can refer to the tips that we provided on the top right of the corner about pronouns, subject pronouns, object pronouns, and possessive pronouns. To start the activity, they need to accept missions. We add that component background music so that it can become more interesting and exciting. So what students need to do is, students need to record all 4 scrolls. For example, students need to answer the correct pronouns for the glitching words, the no glitching words. For example, students answer it incorrectly, they will receive hint and try again. On to the second scroll. If students manage to answer correctly, they also receive an explanation, a detailed explanation about the answer. Finally, students will receive the report and the final scores from the activity. That's all from section 6. Moving on to the closing page. closing page is a congratulations remark. That's all from me. Let's move on to the reflection and lesson.
So moving on to the reflection part. So when designing this self-instruction module, there are several challenges that we face. So the first challenge is the unrelatable content of the textbook itself. So as we know, the PULSE 2 textbook is basically based on UK and US context. So to solve this challenge, we need to localize the content to make it more relatable and engaging for Form 2 students, Malaysian students. And the second challenge is the Canva code itself. So why? Because the Canva code is quite troublesome, because when we give prompts to the Canva code, it does not give the right activity that we want. And when we give more prompts over and over again, sometimes the Canva code is there's something problem with the activity that were given from the Canva code. So for the solution, we just keep on giving prompts until it is perfect, and also we make dua to Allah to help us. And for the third challenge is to transform the textbook into a self-instruction module. So for this, we solve this by thinking creatively to keep the content the same but more interactive, and also we ask the AI assistants to help us to design a more engaging self-instruction module. So from all this self-instruction module, we learn that effective instructional design requires more than creativity and technology skills. We learn the importance of careful planning, clear communication, and designing with the learner's needs in mind. And most importantly, we learn that technology is only a tool. The real goal is to create meaningful learning experiences that help students learn independently and confidently. So I think that's all from us. Thank you.